Rebecca Walsh had been the senior accountant at Greenfield Medical Center for 12 years. She loved her job. The hospital served a rural community of 50,000 people, and she knew the work they did saved lives every day. She'd seen the hospital expand from a small regional facility to a respected medical center with specialized departments and state-of-the-art equipment. The hospital's success was largely credited to Thomas Brennan, the chief financial officer who had joined 8 years ago. Brennan was brilliant with finances, charismatic with donors, and had a gift for finding funding when everyone else said it was impossible. He'd secured grants that brought in a new cardiac unit, negotiated contracts that cut costs without reducing quality, and somehow always balanced the budget even in tight years. The board of directors loved him. The community praised him. Medical staff appreciated that he found money for equipment and programs. Rebecca had always admired Brennan's financial acumen. But 6 months ago, something started bothering her. It began with a discrepancy she noticed while reconciling accounts. A payment to a medical equipment supplier seemed slightly higher than the invoice she'd processed. Just $3,000 difference. She assumed it was a clerical error, made a note to investigate, and moved on. Then she found another discrepancy, and another. Each one was small, a few $1,000s here, a few thousand there. Individually, they could be mistakes. Together, they formed a pattern. Rebecca started digging deeper, staying late to review financial records from the past several years. Rebecca did the math 3 times, certain she must be wrong. But the numbers were clear: approximately $2.3 million in unexplained overpayments and mysterious transactions. She checked the vendors. Many were legitimate companies the hospital did business with regularly. But several vendors she couldn't verify. They had business names and addresses, but when she searched online, she found no websites, no presence, no evidence they actually existed. Rebecca's hands shook as she compiled her findings. This looked like embezzlement. Systematic, sophisticated embezzlement happening over years. And all the transactions had one thing in common: they'd been approved by Thomas Brennan. Rebecca didn't sleep that night. She kept thinking about all the reasons she might be wrong. Maybe there was a legitimate explanation she didn't understand. Maybe these were authorized payments for confidential contracts. Maybe her analysis was flawed. Thomas Brennan was respected, successful, trusted by everyone. Who was she to accuse him of stealing from a hospital? But she couldn't ignore what she'd found. The next morning, Rebecca made an appointment with Janet Cooper, the hospital's chief executive officer. She brought her documentation, her spreadsheets, her analysis. Her mouth was dry as she explained what she'd discovered. Janet listened carefully, her expression growing more serious with each page Rebecca showed her. When Rebecca finished, Janet was quiet for a long moment. "Rebecca, these are serious allegations," she finally said. "Thomas Brennan has been instrumental in this hospital's success. Are you absolutely certain about this?" "I've checked everything 3 times," Rebecca said. "I could be misunderstanding something, but the pattern is clear. The amounts don't match, the vendors can't be verified, and it's been happening for years." Janet nodded slowly. "I need to discuss this with the board chair before we proceed. This isn't something we can investigate casually. I wanted to keep this absolutely confidential. Don't discuss it with anyone. Can you compile a complete report of everything you've found?" Rebecca spent the next week creating a comprehensive report. Every discrepancy, every suspicious vendor, every transaction that didn't add up. It was meticulous, thorough, undeniable. She submitted it to Janet and waited. Days passed, then weeks. Rebecca heard nothing. When she tried to schedule a follow-up meeting with Janet, she was told the CEO was too busy. Rebecca started to worry that her report was being ignored or buried. Meanwhile, Thomas Brennan continued his work, continued being praised for his financial leadership. Rebecca saw him in the cafeteria one day, laughing with doctors, talking about the new pediatric wing he was planning. She felt sick. One afternoon, Rebecca received an email from HR requesting a meeting to discuss her role and responsibilities. Her heart sank. When she arrived at the HR office, she found not just the HR director but also Thomas Brennan and Janet Cooper. "Rebecca," Janet began, her voice cold, "we need to discuss some concerns about your performance and the allegations you've made." For the next hour, Rebecca was interrogated. Had she been under stress? Was she having personal problems? Did she understand the seriousness of false accusations? Thomas Brennan sat calmly, occasionally interjecting with concerned comments about Rebecca's well-being, suggesting perhaps she was overwhelmed and had made mistakes in her analysis. Rebecca realized with growing horror that they weren't investigating Brennan. They were trying to discredit her. She stood her ground, repeated her findings, insisted the numbers were accurate. But she could see she wasn't being believed. The office was silent except for the ticking of a clock on the wall. Rebecca left the office, feeling defeated and alone. The report lay forgotten on Janet's desk, buried under a pile of other documents. The meeting ended with Rebecca being placed on administrative leave, while her performance issues were reviewed. She was escorted to her desk to collect personal items, then walked out of the building by security. Rebecca sat in her car in the parking lot, shaking. She'd done the right thing, reported what she'd found, and now she was being punished for it. The hospital was protecting Brennan, sacrificing her to avoid the scandal. For 2 days, Rebecca considered just letting it go. But she couldn't do it. $2.3 million stolen from a nonprofit hospital meant less money for patient care, for equipment, for programs. Rebecca contacted the state's healthcare fraud hotline and made a detailed report. Then she contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Then she contacted a lawyer who specialized in whistleblower cases. Within 2 weeks, federal investigators arrived at Greenfield Medical Center with search warrants. They seized financial records, computers, servers. They interviewed staff. They audited accounts. The hospital board, suddenly realizing the seriousness of the situation, hired an independent forensic accounting firm to conduct their own investigation. Thomas Brennan hired a criminal defense attorney. The local newspaper got wind of the investigation and published a front-page story: "Beloved Hospital CFO under federal investigation for alleged embezzlement." The forensic accountants ultimately determined that over 8 years, Thomas Brennan had stolen $2.7 million from Greenfield Medical Center. He'd used the money to fund a lavish lifestyle, a vacation home, luxury cars, expensive trips, all while maintaining the image of a dedicated public servant who lived modestly. The federal investigation expanded. Investigators discovered Brennan had done the same thing at his previous job, a nonprofit foundation, where he'd stolen $800,000 before quietly resigning when an audit got too close. That organization had never reported the theft, choosing to let him leave rather than face the scandal. If they had reported it, Brennan would never have been hired at Greenfield, and $2.7 million wouldn't have been stolen from a hospital serving a rural community. Brennan was arrested and charged with wire fraud, money laundering, and theft from a healthcare facility. His trial was set for the following year. Meanwhile, Rebecca's whistleblower attorney filed a wrongful termination lawsuit against Greenfield Medical Center. The hospital tried to settle quietly, but Rebecca refused. She wanted accountability, wanted the public to know how the hospital had tried to silence her rather than investigate the fraud. The case went to court. Hospital administrators testified that they'd been conducting their own investigation and Rebecca's leave was unrelated. But Rebecca's attorney produced emails showing administrators discussing how to handle the Rebecca problem and protect Thomas and the hospital's reputation. The jury found in Rebecca's favor. The hospital was ordered to pay damages, reinstate Rebecca with back pay, and implement new whistleblower protections. The publicity from Rebecca's case attracted attention from other healthcare facilities. 3 more people came forward with information about financial irregularities at their hospitals. One led to the discovery of a similar embezzlement scheme. Another uncovered insurance fraud. A third revealed kickback arrangements between administrators and contractors. Each investigation started because someone had the courage to report what they'd seen, and each was made easier because Rebecca had shown that whistleblowers could prevail even when institutions tried to silence them. Thomas Brennan's trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming: bank records, forged documents, testimony from investigators who'd traced the money. Brennan's defense attorney tried to argue the transactions were legitimate business expenses or authorized payments, but couldn't explain why the money went to companies Brennan owned or accounts he controlled. The jury found him guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution. But the damage was done. The $2.7 million he'd stolen had been spent on houses, cars, vacations, gambling. There was no way to recover most of it. Greenfield Medical Center faced a financial crisis. Rebecca returned to work, but it was awkward. Some colleagues resented her for causing the scandal. Others treated her like a hero. She tried to just do her job, but everything had changed. After a year, Rebecca accepted a position with the State Healthcare Fraud Investigation Unit. Her experience made her uniquely qualified to train auditors and investigators to recognize embezzlement schemes. She also became an advocate for whistleblower protections, testifying before legislative committees about the need for stronger laws. People who report fraud are often treated like troublemakers rather than truth-tellers, she told one committee. Organizations prioritize protecting their reputation over investigating wrongdoing. Until we change that culture, fraud will continue because people are too afraid to speak up. Her testimony helped pass stronger whistleblower protection laws in the state, with significant penalties for organizations that retaliated against employees who reported suspected fraud. Greenfield Medical Center slowly recovered. New leadership rebuilt trust with the community, demonstrated improved financial controls, and focused on transparency. They created a scholarship fund in Rebecca's name for accounting students, acknowledging that her integrity had ultimately protected the hospital even though it had cost them in the short term. 5 years after the investigation, the hospital held a community event celebrating their recovery and renewed commitment to their mission. Rebecca was invited to speak. Standing before an audience of hospital staff, board members, and community members, Rebecca was nervous. She'd been vilified by many of these same people when she first reported her concerns. But she spoke honestly about her experience. "When I found those discrepancies, I was terrified," she said. "Not just of being wrong, but of the consequences of being right. I knew reporting it would cause problems. This hospital made mistakes in how they initially responded to my report. But ultimately, justice was served, changes were made, and the community is better protected now. That's what matters. Not that problems never happen, but that when they do, we have the courage to address them." The audience applauded. After her speech, several hospital employees approached Rebecca privately. 2 mentioned they'd noticed things that concerned them, nothing as serious as what she'd found, but small irregularities they'd been uncertain about reporting. "Should I say something?" one asked. "What if I'm wrong?" Rebecca thought carefully before responding. Document what you've seen. If you have genuine concerns, report them through proper channels. You might be wrong, and that's okay. It's better to report something that turns out to be innocent than to stay silent about something that's harmful. Organizations should welcome people who care enough to speak up, even if sometimes they're mistaken. Both employees eventually reported their concerns. One turned out to be a clerical error, quickly corrected. The other uncovered a kickback scheme between a department manager and a contractor. Not huge amounts, but still theft. The scheme was stopped, the manager fired, and the hospital's reputation for taking fraud seriously was reinforced. Greenfield Medical Center became a case study in business ethics classes and healthcare administration programs. Rebecca was invited to speak at conferences, to train auditors, to help other organizations develop fraud prevention programs. She never sought the spotlight, but she recognized she had a responsibility to share what she'd learned. One afternoon, Rebecca received a letter from a woman named Diana Porter. Diana worked as a finance director for a large nonprofit organization and had discovered what she believed was embezzlement by her executive director. She was terrified to report it, worried she'd lose her job, worried she'd be wrong, worried about the consequences. "Your story gave me courage," Diana wrote. "I reported what I found. The investigation is ongoing, and it's been difficult, but I keep thinking about what you said, that staying silent means the harm continues. Thank you for showing that doing the right thing is possible, even when it's hard." Rebecca kept that letter. On difficult days, when she doubted herself or wondered if speaking up had been worth the cost, she reread it. She thought about Thomas Brennan, who might still be stealing from hospitals if she'd stayed silent. She thought about the other fraud cases that were uncovered because her story encouraged others to report concerns. She thought about the improved policies and protections that now existed. The personal cost had been real. Rebecca had endured months of stress, professional isolation, uncertainty, and financial strain during her wrongful termination. Her reputation had been attacked. She'd lost friendships with colleagues who'd sided with the hospital administration. Some members of the community still believed she'd caused unnecessary trouble, that she should have handled it quietly, that her actions had hurt the hospital. But Rebecca had no regrets. She'd acted with integrity, followed the evidence, spoken the truth even when it was unwelcome. Years later, Rebecca attended a community health fair at Greenfield Medical Center. Walking through the hospital, she noticed something on the wall outside the administrative offices, a plaque titled Principles of Integrity. Rebecca smiled. Thomas Brennan, meanwhile, served his sentence in federal prison.